Months passed, and the once heavy clouds of the trial began to fade into distant memories for Emma and Max. Life moved forward, not perfectly, but with a renewed sense of hope and purpose. Max had grown more confident, his laughter returning in full force as he rediscovered the joys of childhood. He spent hours playing soccer with his friends, building Lego towers that reached the ceiling, and sketching pictures of superheroes who always stood up for what was right. One day, while coloring at the kitchen table, he proudly showed Emma a drawing of a boy standing tall in a courtroom, holding a piece of paper like a superhero cape. "That's me," he said with a grin. "I'm brave now." Emma chuckled, ruffling his hair affectionately. "You've always been brave," she told him. "But you're also wise, and kind, and stronger than most adults I know." Her words made Max beam with pride, and for the first time in a long while, she saw the weight of fear completely lift from his shoulders. It wasn't just about surviving the trial anymore. It was about thriving despite it. Their relationship deepened too, forged even stronger by the challenges they'd faced together. Emma made sure to carve out special moments for them. Friday movie nights, Sunday pancake breakfasts, and evening walks where they talked about everything under the sun. On one such walk, Max looked up at her thoughtfully and asked, "Do you think Dad will ever change?" Emma paused, choosing her words carefully. "People can change if they really want to," she said gently. "But sometimes people stay stuck in their choices. What matters is that we choose kindness, even when others don't." Max nodded slowly, seeming to understand. Though he still thought about his father occasionally, the ache of betrayal softened with time. Instead, he focused on the love and stability he had with his mom, knowing that their bond was unshakable. Daniel, meanwhile, faded further from their lives. Supervised visits were scheduled, but he rarely showed up, sending excuses through his lawyer instead. At first, Max felt hurt by his absence, but over time, he came to accept it, not because he stopped caring, but because he realized some things were beyond his control. The story of Max's bravery continued to inspire those around him. Teachers often shared his courage with other students during class discussions about honesty and integrity. Even strangers approached Emma at the grocery store or park, thanking her for raising such a remarkable child. "He's changed how I talk to my own kids," one woman confided, tears glistening in her eyes. These encounters reminded Emma of the ripple effect of truth. One act of courage could touch countless lives. By summer, Max declared himself ready for a fresh start. With Emma's encouragement, he signed up for a week-long art camp, something he'd been nervous about before the trial. To his delight, he thrived there, making new friends and discovering a passion for painting. On the last day of camp, he presented Emma with a vibrant canvas, featuring a bright yellow sun rising over a calm blue sea. "This is us," he explained, pointing to two stick figures holding hands beneath the sun. "We got through the storm, and now we're happy again." Emma hugged him tightly, overwhelmed with gratitude for how far they'd come. They weren't just survivors, they were conquerors, proving that love and honesty could overcome even the darkest storms. As they stood side by side, watching the real-life sunset mirror Max's painting, Emma whispered, "No matter what happens, we'll always face it together. You and me against the world." And in that moment, surrounded by golden light and boundless possibilities, they knew their future was theirs to shape, a testament to resilience, courage, and the unbreakable power of family. In the weeks following the trial, life began to settle into a new rhythm for Emma and Max. The courtroom drama that had once consumed their lives was now a distant memory, though its impact lingered in ways both big and small. For Max, the days were filled with a mix of relief and adjustment. He no longer woke up dreading what his father might demand of him or worrying about lying on the stand. Yet the emotional scars ran deep, and Emma could see how much the ordeal had affected her son. To help him heal, Emma enrolled Max in therapy sessions with a kind-hearted counselor named Ms. Clara. At first, Max was hesitant, unsure of what to expect. But as the weeks went by, he began opening up about his feelings. The fear, the guilt, and the overwhelming sense of betrayal he had felt when his father asked him to lie. Miss Clara listened patiently, encouraging Max to express himself through drawings and stories. Slowly but surely, he started to regain his confidence, finding joy again in simple things like playing outside, riding his bike, and laughing with friends at school. Emma, too, sought support during this time. She joined a local support group for single parents, where she connected with others who understood the challenges of raising children alone. Sharing her story helped her process everything they had been through, and hearing others' experiences reminded her that she wasn't alone. Some nights, after tucking Max into bed, she would sit by the window, reflecting on how far they had come. There were still moments of sadness, thoughts of what could have been if Daniel had chosen differently, but those feelings were outweighed by gratitude for Max's bravery, for justice being served, and for the love they shared. News of the case spread quickly through their community, sparking conversations about honesty, integrity, and the importance of protecting children from manipulation. Friends and neighbors rallied around Emma and Max, offering words of encouragement and practical help whenever needed. One neighbor even organized a small fundraiser to cover some of Emma's legal expenses, reminding her just how many people cared about their family. For Max, seeing such kindness restored his faith in people and reinforced the idea that speaking the truth, no matter how hard, can make a difference. At school, Max became something of a quiet hero among his classmates. When word got out that he had stood up to his father in court, kids who barely noticed him before suddenly looked up to him. Teachers praised his courage, and even the principal invited him to speak at an assembly about standing up for what's right. Though Max initially felt nervous about sharing his story publicly, he eventually agreed, knowing it might inspire others facing similar struggles. Standing on stage, clutching a microphone almost as big as his head, he spoke softly but clearly. "It's scary to tell the truth sometimes," he admitted, "but it's always better than keeping secrets." As spring arrived, bringing warmer weather and brighter days, Emma and Max found themselves enjoying life together more than ever. They spent weekends hiking in nearby parks, baking cookies in the kitchen, and reading bedtime stories under cozy blankets. These little moments became treasures, reminders of the bond they had fought so hard to protect. And while the shadow of Daniel's betrayal still lingered in the background, it no longer defined them. Instead, they focused on building a future full of laughter, trust, and unconditional love. One evening, as they sat together watching the sunset paint the sky in shades of orange and pink, Max turned to his mother and said, "Mom, I'm glad we told the truth." Emma smiled, pulling him close. "Me too, sweetheart," she replied. "Because of you, we're stronger than ever." In that moment, surrounded by beauty and peace, they knew they had emerged from the storm, not unscathed, but triumphant. Their journey wasn't over, but they faced it together, ready to embrace whatever came next. The courtroom buzzed with anticipation as the judge returned from his brief recess, his expression unreadably stern. Everyone leaned forward in their seats, holding their breath for the final verdict. The air felt heavy, charged with emotion and uncertainty. Emma clutched Max's hand tightly, her heart pounding in her chest. She could feel the boy's small fingers trembling within hers, but there was a quiet strength in the way he sat upright, no longer hiding his face. He had done what he thought was right, and now all they could do was wait. Daniel, on the other hand, looked like a man who already knew the outcome. His shoulders slumped, his tie askew, and his once polished demeanor completely shattered. He stared at the floor, avoiding eye contact with anyone, especially Max. Even his lawyers seemed to have given up, flipping idly through papers without much conviction. The contrast between Daniel's defeated posture and Max's newfound courage was striking, a silent testament to the power of truth over manipulation. "Court is back in session," the judge declared, tapping his gavel lightly to restore order. His voice carried a weight that silenced even the faintest whispers in the gallery. "After careful consideration of the evidence presented today, including the forensic analysis of the note and the testimony of the child, I have reached my decision." He paused, looking directly at Daniel before continuing. "It is clear to this court that Mr. Reeves has engaged in behavior that is both unethical and harmful to his son. Pressuring a child to lie under oath is not only unacceptable, it is an egregious violation of trust." The judge's words landed like hammer strikes, each sentence driving home the gravity of Daniel's actions. Gasps rippled through the room as people absorbed the implications. For Emma and Max, however, it was a moment of vindication. Tears welled up in Emma's eyes, not of sadness this time, but of relief and gratitude. She squeezed Max's hand gently, giving him a reassuring smile. He glanced up at her, his wide eyes reflecting a mixture of fear and hope. It was as if he were finally beginning to understand that he had made the right choice by speaking up. Turning his attention to custody arrangements, the judge continued, his tone firm yet compassionate. "In light of these findings, it is in the best interest of the child that full custody be granted to Ms. Carter. Furthermore, Mr. Reeves will be prohibited from contacting either the mother or the child without supervised visitation, pending further evaluation of his fitness as a parent." The gavel struck again, sealing the ruling with finality. A wave of murmurs swept through the courtroom, some congratulating Emma quietly while others shook their heads in disbelief at Daniel's downfall. But amidst the noise, one voice stood out. "Max, thank you," he whispered so softly that only Emma heard him. She pulled him into a tight hug, tears streaming down her face as she kissed the top of his head. "You're the bravest boy I know," she told him, her voice choked with emotion. Max buried his face in her shoulder, finally allowing himself to cry, not out of fear, but out of relief. Meanwhile, Daniel sat motionless, staring blankly ahead as if trying to process what had just happened. His lawyer placed a hand on his shoulder, offering a few muted words of consolation, but Daniel shrugged it off. There was nothing left to say. He had lost not only the case, but also the trust and love of his son. As the courtroom began to empty, he lingered behind, watching silently as Emma and Max gathered their things and prepared to leave. For a brief moment, their eyes met across the room, but where there might have once been warmth or connection, there was now only emptiness. As Emma and Max stepped outside into the fresh air, the weight of the past weeks seemed to lift off their shoulders. People stopped them briefly to offer kind words and pats on the back, but Emma kept moving, eager to get Max away from the chaos. "We're going to be okay," she said, kneeling down to look him in the eye. "No matter what happens, we'll always have each other." Max nodded, managing a small, tentative smile. Though the road ahead wouldn't be easy, they faced it together, with honesty, resilience, and a bond stronger than ever. The courtroom was buzzing with a mix of shock and disbelief as Daniel's lies began to unravel. The judge's stern voice echoed through the room, demanding answers that Daniel clearly wasn't prepared to give. "Mr. Reeves," the judge repeated, his tone sharp and unyielding, "you have been implicated in coercing your own son into lying under oath. Do you deny this accusation?" Daniel hesitated, beads of sweat forming on his forehead. His polished confidence had completely vanished, leaving behind a man who looked desperate and cornered. I didn't mean for it to go this far," Daniel stammered, his voice faltering. He glanced at Max, but the boy refused to meet his gaze, burying his face further into his mother's shoulder. Emma sat rigidly beside him, her eyes locked on Daniel with a mixture of anger and sadness. She had always suspected something was off about his sudden reappearance in their lives, but she never imagined he would stoop so low as to manipulate their child. Daniel's lawyer tried to intervene, stepping forward to defend his client. "Your Honor," he said hurriedly, "my client may have made mistakes, but they were born out of love and desperation. He simply wants to reconnect with his son." But the judge cut him off with a raised hand, his patience wearing thin. Love does not involve pressuring a child to lie or fabricate stories against their own mother, the judge snapped, his voice carrying an authority that silenced the entire room. Even Daniel's lawyer took a step back, realizing there was little he could do to salvage the situation. As the reality of his predicament sank in, Daniel grew increasingly agitated. He paced back and forth near the defense table, muttering under his breath. At one point, he stopped abruptly and turned to face the gallery, as if searching for support from the people watching. But all he found were cold stares and shaking heads. Some whispered among themselves, while others simply looked away, unwilling to acknowledge him any longer. It was clear that public opinion had shifted entirely against him. Max, meanwhile, clung tightly to his mother, his small body trembling despite the warmth of her embrace. He had done what he thought was right, but speaking up had taken a toll on him. Emma rubbed his back soothingly, whispering reassurances into his ear. "You're safe now, sweetheart," she murmured. "You don't have to be afraid anymore." Her words seemed to calm him slightly, though his grip on her arm remained firm. The judge leaned back in his chair, studying Daniel carefully. There was no denying the evidence. The note, the forensic analysis, and Max's heartfelt testimony painted a damning picture. Still, the judge gave Daniel one last chance to explain himself. "If you wish to say anything in your defense, now is the time," he said firmly. Daniel opened his mouth to respond but quickly closed it again, unable to find the right words. Instead, he slumped into his seat, defeated, running a hand over his face, as if trying to erase the mess he had created. In the gallery, whispers grew louder as people speculated about what would happen next. Would Daniel face legal consequences for attempting to manipulate the trial? Could Max ever trust him again? And most importantly, how would this affect the custody decision? The tension in the air was almost unbearable, every second stretching longer than the last. Finally, the judge spoke again, his voice cutting through the noise like a blade. "Given the new evidence presented today," he announced, addressing the entire courtroom, "I am inclined to believe that Mr. Reeves cannot be trusted to act in the best interest of his son. This court will not tolerate behavior that compromises the safety and well-being of a child." His words sent a ripple of approval through the gallery, punctuated by quiet nods and murmurs of agreement. For Emma and Max, it felt like the first glimmer of hope after weeks of uncertainty. They exchanged a glance, their eyes filled with relief and gratitude. But for Daniel, the weight of his actions was finally catching up with him. As the judge ordered a recess to deliberate on the final ruling, Daniel sat motionless, staring blankly ahead. The confident man who had walked into the courtroom earlier that day was gone, replaced by someone who had lost everything, including the trust of his own son. The courtroom was so quiet you could hear the faint rustle of papers and the occasional creak of chairs as everyone waited with bated breath. Max stood at the stand, his small frame dwarfed by the heavy wooden podium in front of him. His hands trembled slightly as he held up the crumpled note for everyone to see. The judge squinted, leaning forward in his chair to get a better look. "Let me see that," he said firmly, his voice cutting through the silence like a knife. Max hesitated for just a moment before stepping down from the witness stand and walking toward the judge. Each step felt like it took an eternity, but when he finally reached the bench, he handed over the note with a mixture of relief and apprehension. The judge carefully unfolded it, smoothing out the creases as if handling fragile evidence. As he read the words scribbled on the page, his expression hardened. It didn't take long for him to realize the gravity of what he was looking at. "This appears to be instructions," the judge muttered under his breath, loud enough for those closest to hear. He glanced sharply at Daniel, who shifted uncomfortably in his seat. "Is this your handwriting?" the judge demanded, holding up the note so Daniel could see it clearly. For a split second, Daniel looked like a deer caught in headlights. Then, regaining some composure, he shook his head vehemently. "Absolutely not," he protested, his voice rising defensively. "That's fake. Someone must have forged it." But the judge wasn't convinced. He ordered a forensic expert to analyze the handwriting immediately, right there in the courtroom. A hush fell over the room as the expert, a middle-aged woman with glasses perched on her nose, was summoned to the front. She examined the note closely, comparing it to samples of Daniel's handwriting taken from earlier court documents. Every pen stroke, every loop and curve was scrutinized under her trained eye. The tension in the room was palpable, almost suffocating, as people leaned forward in their seats, desperate to catch a glimpse of what she might discover. While they waited, Max returned to his seat beside his mother. Emma wrapped an arm around him protectively, pulling him close. Her tears had dried, replaced by a steely determination. She whispered softly into his ear, "You did the right thing, sweetheart. I'm so proud of you." Max nodded, burying his face in her shoulder for a moment before sitting up straight again. Despite everything, he seemed calmer now, as if a weight had been lifted off his shoulders. Finally, after what felt like hours, the forensic expert cleared her throat and addressed the court. "Your Honor," she began, her tone professional and measured. "The handwriting on the note matches the defendant's samples provided. There is no doubt. It was written by Mr. Reeves." Gasps erupted throughout the gallery, followed by murmurs of disbelief and outrage. People turned to stare at Daniel, whose face had gone pale. He opened his mouth to protest, but no words came out. Even his lawyer looked stunned, flipping through notes frantically, as if searching for a way to salvage the situation. The judge's expression darkened. "Mr. Reeves," he said sternly, fixing Daniel with a piercing gaze, "care to explain yourself?" Daniel stammered, visibly flustered. I don't know how that got written," he blurted out, his voice cracking. "Maybe someone tricked me or planted it." His excuses sounded hollow even to his own ears, and the skeptical glares from the crowd only made him more agitated. He ran a hand through his hair, pacing back and forth like a caged animal. Emma watched silently, her arms still wrapped tightly around Max. She didn't need to say anything. The truth had spoken for itself. The note wasn't just a piece of paper, it was proof of manipulation, of a father exploiting his own son for personal gain. And now, thanks to Max's courage, the entire courtroom knew the ugly reality behind Daniel's polished facade. The judge tapped his gavel lightly, signaling for order. "We will proceed accordingly," he declared, his voice firm and unyielding. Whatever happened next, one thing was certain. Daniel's lies had finally caught up with him. The courtroom was frozen in time, every pair of eyes glued to the small boy holding a crumpled piece of paper. Max's voice wavered slightly as he continued, his tiny hands trembling as he unfolded the note. "He made me promise," Max said softly, glancing at his father before quickly looking away. "He said if I did what he wanted, he'd buy me toys and take me to the park. But I didn't want to lie." His words hung heavy in the air, each sentence adding another layer of shock to the already tense atmosphere. Emma sat motionless, her heart pounding in her chest as she listened to her son speak. She had suspected something wasn't right. Max had been unusually quiet and withdrawn lately, but she never imagined it went this far. Her mind raced with questions. How long had Daniel been pressuring him? What else had he told their son? Tears streamed down her face as she realized the weight Max had been carrying all alone. She wanted to rush to him, to pull him into her arms and tell him everything would be okay, but she forced herself to stay seated, knowing this was his moment to shine. Daniel, on the other hand, looked like a cornered animal. His earlier confidence had completely evaporated, replaced by a mixture of anger and panic. He shifted uncomfortably in his seat, avoiding eye contact with both the judge and his son. When he finally spoke, his voice was sharp and defensive. "That's ridiculous," he snapped, leaning forward aggressively. "I would never do such a thing. This is absurd." But his outburst only drew more attention to him, making him look even guiltier. The judge raised a hand, silencing Daniel with a stern glare. "Let the boy finish," he commanded, his tone leaving no room for argument. Daniel sank back into his chair, his face flushed with frustration. The gallery buzzed quietly, people exchanging whispers and speculative glances. Some stared at Daniel with open disbelief, while others watched Max with a mix of sympathy and admiration. It was clear that the tide was turning, and Daniel's carefully constructed narrative was beginning to unravel. Max took another shaky breath, summoning the courage to keep going. "This note, it says exactly what I'm supposed to say about Mom," he explained, holding it up for everyone to see. "It says I should tell you she doesn't care about me and that she leaves me alone all the time. But none of that is true." His voice cracked on the last word, and he paused to wipe his tears with the back of his hand. The raw emotion in his voice struck a chord with everyone in the room, even those who had initially doubted Emma's side of the story. "I love my mom," Max continued, his voice growing stronger despite the tears streaming down his cheeks. "She works hard to take care of me. She helps me with my homework, makes sure I eat my vegetables, and tucks me in at night. She's always there for me, even when things are tough. My dad, he wasn't there. And now he wants me to lie so he can win. But I don't want to lie anymore." His words hit like a tidal wave, washing away any lingering doubts about who was truly in the wrong. The judge leaned forward, studying Max intently. There was no mistaking the sincerity in the boy's voice or the pain in his eyes. For a child so young to stand up against an adult, especially his own father, took immense bravery. It was a rare moment of clarity in a case clouded by accusations and counter-accusations. As Max finished speaking, the courtroom remained eerily silent. Even Daniel's lawyer seemed unsure of how to respond, flipping through papers in a desperate attempt to regain control of the situation. But it was too late. The damage had been done. Max had laid bare a truth that couldn't be ignored. And now all eyes were on the judge, waiting to see how he would handle this unprecedented turn of events. Just as the arguments in the courtroom reached a fever pitch, something unexpected happened. While Daniel's lawyer was passionately defending his client's character, a small voice pierced through the tension. "Your Honor." The words rang out clear and sharp, cutting off the lawyer mid-sentence. Everyone turned in surprise to see Max standing up, his tiny frame shaking, but his eyes fixed firmly on the judge. For a moment, the room fell silent, the kind of stunned silence that follows an unforeseen interruption. The judge blinked, momentarily caught off guard. He adjusted his glasses and peered down at the boy. "Young man," he said, his deep voice softer than usual. "What is it?" Max hesitated, glancing toward his mother for a split second before stepping forward. His backpack was still clutched tightly in one hand, its straps twisted around his fingers. He looked impossibly small against the backdrop of the imposing courtroom, yet there was an undeniable strength in the way he stood his ground. "I need to say something," Max replied, his voice trembling but resolute. Murmurs rippled through the gallery as people whispered to each other, unsure of what to expect. Emma's face paled, her heart pounding as she watched her son walk toward the front of the room. She wanted to stop him, to shield him from whatever he was about to do, but she knew better than to intervene. This was Max's moment, whether anyone liked it or not. Daniel, meanwhile, shifted uncomfortably in his seat. A flicker of unease crossed his face as he watched his son approach the stand. He exchanged a quick glance with his lawyer, who gave him a reassuring nod, though the gesture seemed forced. Whatever confidence Daniel had exuded earlier was beginning to waver, replaced by a growing sense of apprehension. Max climbed onto the witness chair, his legs dangling above the floor. He took a deep breath, clutching the crumpled piece of paper from his backpack even tighter. The judge leaned forward slightly, intrigued by the boy's unexpected bravery. "Go ahead, son," he encouraged gently. "What do you want to tell us?" For a brief moment, Max faltered, his courage wavering under the weight of so many eyes on him. But then he straightened up, squaring his shoulders like a soldier preparing for battle. "I have something important to say," he began, his voice gaining strength with every word. "My dad, he's not telling the truth." Gasps echoed through the courtroom as heads snapped back and forth between Max and Daniel. Emma covered her mouth with her hands, tears welling up in her eyes. She had no idea what Max was about to reveal, but she could feel the gravity of the situation settling over the room. Daniel, on the other hand, stiffened visibly, his jaw tightening as he stared daggers at his son. His polished facade cracked ever so slightly, revealing a hint of panic beneath the surface. The judge raised a hand to quiet the murmuring crowd. "Let him speak," he ordered, his tone firm but kind. All eyes returned to Max, who swallowed hard before continuing. "He told me to lie," Max confessed, his voice breaking slightly. "He said I had to say things about my mom, bad things that aren't true." The courtroom erupted into whispers again, but this time, they were louder, more urgent. People leaned forward in their seats, captivated by the unfolding drama. As Max spoke, he pulled the crumpled note from his pocket and held it aloft for everyone to see. It was wrinkled and worn, as if it had been read and reread countless times. "He wrote this," Max explained, his voice steadying as he found his rhythm. "It says what I'm supposed to say during the trial." The room went deathly quiet once more, the tension thick enough to cut with a knife. No one dared to breathe as they waited to hear what would happen next. The courtroom was alive with tension, a heavy silence broken only by the sharp voices of lawyers arguing back and forth. The air felt thick, like a storm about to break, as everyone waited for the judge's decision. At the center of it all sat Emma Carter, a young mother with tired eyes, but fierce determination etched on her face. She clutched the edge of her seat, her knuckles white, as she listened to the arguments swirling around her. On the other side of the room stood Daniel Reeves, Max's father, who had suddenly reappeared after years of being absent from his son's life. His polished suit and calm demeanor made him look confident, almost smug, but Emma knew better than to trust appearances. Max, their 8-year-old son, sat quietly in the corner of the room, clutching his backpack tightly against his chest. He looked small and out of place in the formal setting, his wide eyes darting nervously between his parents. The weight of the situation seemed too big for someone so young to carry, yet here he was, caught in the middle of a battle that would shape his future. Every now and then, he glanced at his mother, silently seeking reassurance. Emma would give him a weak smile, trying to mask her own anxiety, but it was clear how much this ordeal was affecting them both. Daniel's lawyer spoke first, painting a picture of a loving father who simply wanted to reconnect with his child. "Mr. Reeves has changed," the lawyer insisted, his voice smooth and convincing. "He regrets his past mistakes and is ready to step up as a parent." Some people in the courtroom nodded along, swayed by the carefully crafted narrative. But Emma's lawyer countered fiercely, pointing out Daniel's long absence and lack of involvement in Max's life. Where was Mr. Reeves when Max needed him? The lawyer demanded, gesturing toward the boy sitting quietly in the corner. Why does he choose now to show up? As the debate continued, the judge leaned forward, his expression unreadable. Known for his no-nonsense attitude, Judge Harris had a reputation for cutting through lies and getting to the truth. Today, however, even he seemed unsure of what to make of the case. The stakes were high. This wasn't just about custody. It was about Max's safety and well-being. Both sides presented compelling arguments, but beneath the surface, there was an unspoken tension, a feeling that something deeper was at play. Meanwhile, Max fidgeted in his seat, clearly uncomfortable. He kept glancing down at his backpack, as if whatever was inside weighed heavily on his mind. Occasionally, he'd tug at the straps or shift uncomfortably, drawing curious looks from those nearby. No one paid much attention to him. He was just a kid, after all. But there was something in his posture, something in the way he chewed on his lip, that hinted at unease. Whatever was going on in his head, it was obvious he wasn't just another passive observer in this courtroom drama. The longer the hearing dragged on, the more restless Max became. His leg bounced up and down under the table, and his grip on the backpack tightened. It was as if he were holding onto a secret, one that threatened to burst free at any moment. Little did anyone know, Max was sitting on a revelation that could change everything, not just for his family, but for everyone watching. And soon, the quiet boy in the corner would find himself at the center of the storm, ready to speak words that would leave the entire courtroom speechless.